Hello and welcome to the midday where we get into some of the more serious and passionate issues crossing the news wires, the stories that are having an impact. People are talking, they're trending, they're going viral. In this case, we're talking about what is going on in Hong Kong versus the Chinese mainland at large. And, it's a complex issue that has roots that go back decades. But in effect, we'll try our best to simplify and summarize so that you have a better understanding of why these folks are protesting in Hong Kong, which was a British colony until 1997. And then it was transferred to China under a one country, two systems sort of arrangement, if you will. It would allow Hong Kong to continue functioning as it always had, with its own legal system, independent, its own police force, basically self-determining. And that was supposed to last for a half century. So now we have this proposed extradition bill, the latest move that concerns pro-democracy people who live there, because essentially the protests began in June over concerns that this bill was going to pass, and it would allow people to be extradited to mainland China. Now, the proposed law basically caused people to become fearful that civil liberties currently enjoyed by Hong Kongers, but denied in China, would be eroded. So sort of a Trojan horse situation where it would be like, or a drip, 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 and then all of a sudden the dam bursts and everything that was cherished by people who live in Hong Kong and who have lived in Hong Kong for years or decades would would go away, and they would assimilate into China and, of course, the iron fist of Chinese rule. So basic law in Hong Kong guarantees that Chinese authorities cannot stifle dissent as they do in China, in the mainland. Now, defenders of the proposed bill said it would target criminals in Hong Kong fleeing legal systems elsewhere. That's what the extradition part is. Opponents fear the law would target not just criminals, but if the state says that a political dissident, somebody who's criticizing China, but living in Hong Kong, well, who's to say that the Chinese government would say that guy's a criminal because he's criticizing us, so we're going to extradite him. And that's why opponents fear that could be the Trojan horse that lets in Chinese government. Now, the Hong Kong chief executive, Carrie Lam, insisted the bill would not apply to issues of free speech, but thus far the protesters are not convinced of that. So in response to the initial protest, the first protest, the bill was suspended, but important to note, it has not been withdrawn completely. So the protests, those initial protests that I was speaking of, they began in April peacefully, and over time, over the last few months, over the summer, they've evolved into a direct challenge to China's Communist Party rule over Hong Kong. The protests began as weekend marches in the streets, but have become a daily phenomenon with violent clashes between police and demonstrators. This is when it really started to pick up steam and make news and make the newscasts, and you'd see it in the news wires and in your news feeds on social media. In June, 2 million people reportedly took part in what was likely the largest protest in Hong Kong's history. So to put this into sort of an imperfect analogy or imperfect context, let's just suppose, run a what if. The rest of the country went red, Republican, conservative, make America great again, and then New York, or the Northeast Corridor, let's say, all went blue, liberal, borderline, if not socialist, then socialist policies, basically blue. The rest of the country's red. We've got an island of blue here. Now, the island of blue people, they don't want to be told by the rest of the country, the red states, hey, this is what you need to do, and these are the laws you need to have. You can't do this, and you can't do that. And the Northeast Corridor, all blue, are saying, no, we're independent of you. We have our own laws and our own police force. It's not too far of a stretch of the imagination to see something like that happening, but essentially that's what we've got in this situation, just transferred over here as a metaphor. So the demonstrators have 5 key demands. These people that were blocking the airport, causing the cancellation of flights into and out of Hong Kong. They're assembling en masse, great number of people. You've seen the dramatic photos in the rain with the umbrellas. So their 5 demands: so the complete withdrawal of the proposed extradition bill that I was talking about, the government to withdraw the use of the word riot as it pertains to protests, the unconditional release of arrested protesters and charges against them dropped, an independent inquiry into police misbehavior, including excessive force, tear gas, rubber bullets at close range, implementation of genuine right to vote, universal suffrage. So those are their demands. Now, going back to July 1st, the protesters forced their way into the legislature. It's a date that's significant because it occurs annually, the date that Britain gave up control of Hong Kong 22 years ago. The annual demonstrations are organized by activists who want to preserve Hong Kong's status. Demonstrators in Hong Kong's international airport, as you'll recall, began blocking travelers last week, forcing airlines to cancel and reschedule. So China, for its part, the government, is saying that these demonstrations are near terrorism. So at least 2 men were set upon by protesters accused of being undercover police, and authorities did admit they have deployed officers disguised as protesters, like basically undercover. So more alarming, more recently, within the last week, China's armed police force was seen conducting exercises near the Hong Kong border. So some have said that that's a clear threat of a crackdown. Also, finally, it was confirmed on Wednesday that an employee of the British consulate in Hong Kong has been detained in mainland China. Simon Chung, 28, a Hong Kong citizen, was apprehended while crossing the border into Hong Kong from China. He is accused of violating China's secret administration punishment law. No specifics have been given on this particular case. So, Brian, what are our viewers saying as we break this down for them? What are their reactions?
We don't have a whole lot of reactions on Facebook. It seems people are listening more so than commenting.
Well, feel free to, as we do every time we do this midday sort of spotlight on what's making news, what's going viral, that sort of thing. We leave it up for a while, even after we have done recounting everything and speaking and informing you. You can continue the conversation among yourselves as the live feed continues. So we invite you to do that right now, and we look forward to seeing you later today on Local 4 News on TV.